Well, it looks like the US is sending in its special forces to help train the rebels. Now, the US supposedly is saying that this is to help them train to fight against ISIS. But again, this comes amid the Syrian army's victories, such as the town of Morak, which the Syrian army took back from the FSA and Jabhat al-Nusra after it was held by them for almost 9 months. Now, it's already pretty suspicious that the US is doing this now. But of course, this is just because the US wants to undo all the progress made by the Syrian army with the help of the Russian airstrikes. And that's why the US is sending in its special forces to help the rebels, not to fight against ISIS, but against Assad and his army, and to halt their progress. The point I want to stress is that the US is not naive. The US knows that a lot of the FSA fighters end up joining ISIS anyways. In fact, the town that the Syrian army recently retook, Morak, was actually being defended by the FSA and Jabhat al-Nusra. And Jabhat al-Nusra, what it basically is the Syrian branch of Al-Qaeda, which the US designates as a terrorist group. So why is the US helping train the FSA if it fights with Al-Qaeda? The whole reason why the US said it wants to take out ISIS is because it's a brutal terrorist group. But again, if the Free Syrian Army is fighting with people like Jabhat al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda in Syria, then what really is the point of training the FSA if they work with such people? Well, the obvious answer to that is they're not training them to fight ISIS. They're training them to fight the Syrian army. That's what they're training them to do. The reason why the US is probably doing this at this current moment is because the Syrian army, along with Hezbollah fighters, have been trying to lift the siege on the Kuwairis military air base. This base has been under ISIS siege for almost 2 years now. And if they lifted this would mean a huge victory for the Syrian army. And more importantly, once the siege has been lifted, Russian jets could possibly be stationed there and carry out more airstrikes on the eastern part of Syria occupied by ISIS, along with rebels who work for the Free Syrian Army like Jabhat al-Nusra, which the US does identify as a terrorist organization, but the US knows that Jabhat al-Nusra is much more effective than the Free Syrian Army, so the US will simply just brush aside the fact that they're Al-Qaeda in Syria. And for that reason, the US would not want the Syrian army to lift a siege on this military airbase, as it would hurt Jabhat al-Nusra and the Free Syrian Army in the long run. So it would seem a real proxy war has begun between the United States and Russia in Syria, now that the US is now sending in ground forces to help the rebels fight, and now Russia is involved with their airstrikes in helping the Syrian army. And this will likely not be the limit for the US and Russian involvement in Syria, and it will probably actually escalate into maybe sending in full-on ground troops in the future. But hopefully it doesn't happen, because if it does happen, the chances for war between Russia and the United States will be very high. Thanks for watching this Between the Lines video, and don't forget to subscribe if you want more videos showing the significance behind world events.